Ukrainian F-16 pilot makes history, destroys 6 cruise missiles in single mission. Ukraine renews attack on Russia's Kursk region, and how Ukrainian SOF eliminates 13 North Korean soldiers, uncover their documents. We will talk about this with Julian Röpcke, senior political editor at Bild. Julian, glad to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
Julian, in your article on Bild, you noted that the Russian army, which is operating on the southern flank of Kursk, is already a few kilometers from the administrative border with the Dnipro region, and even suggest that in a few weeks the fighting could spread to its territory. How Russian army could break through into Dnipropetrovsk region?
Well, I think according to different maps, including of Ukrainian activists like Deep State, and I think there is no disagreement here, the Russian army is bypassing Kursk in the south. They captured Novovasylivka, which is a little village. It's only 7 kilometers away from the oblast order to Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And I was not trying to doom or to have some negative propaganda. I was simply calculating, and I was calculating how long the Russians needed to go to Novovasylivka. And if you look back 7 kilometers to the east, so 7 kilometers to where they were coming, they were going this distance in around 4 weeks. So you can say right now the Russian army south of Kursk is moving 7 kilometers in 4 weeks. And this makes it quite logical that if they, of course, always if they, I don't have a glass ball, I cannot say the future, but if they move the same as they moved in the past 4 weeks, in another 4 weeks, they will be 7 kilometers to the west, which means in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. I don't know if this happens. I always hope that the Ukrainian army is building up strong defenses and will not allow the Russians to continue to the west. But again, if the Russian army moves with the same speed like in the last 4 to 8 weeks in this region, then they would reach Dnipropetrovsk Oblast within 4 to 8 weeks.
Julian, the Russian army is attempting to destroy all building in Kurakhove, thereby eliminating any potential defensive positions for the Ukrainian armed forces, RBC Ukraine reports, citing spokesperson for the Hortitsa Operational and Strategic Group of Troops Viktor Trygubov. As I know, Ukrainian forces are holding out in the western part of the city, including maintaining control over the thermal power plant located there. What's the situation near Kurakhove?
Well, I think you have just seen in the images you have shown, because I knew this question was coming, that compared to other towns in Ukraine, like, for example, Vovchansk or CEASEFIRE, Kurakhove is, I would say, in a well state, I would say. There are not many buildings collapsed because of the extreme Russian shelling. I would say 90% of the living units are still not usable because there's no water, there's no gas, but they are still physically there. So I think it's a very strange argument to say that there is no place to hide. I see from a lot of Ukrainian videos that there are many places to hide. And the Ukrainian army is using right now kamikaze drones to fly into different buildings, into different windows, into different balconies, which the Russians are occupying in dozens and dozens of big buildings. You can see them here. And last but not least, I'm happy that you're also showing the picture of me in the center of Kurakhove in September, in mid-September. This was, am I right? It was 3 months ago, around 3 months ago. And from the recent Russian images of having the city council, having the public bath there and the central park, I have to say, from my impression, the town center still looks alike like it looked 3 months ago when it was held by the Ukrainian army. Right now, there's a little more damage. You have to see this, of course. The roofs have a little more holes and others. So I don't want to lay down anything. The Russians are making life impossible in every town and city and village they capture, because there is no gas, no electricity, no internet, no water. This is all terrible because of Russian shelling. But I would say from a military point of view, the Ukrainian army did not withdraw from Kurakhove because there were no place to hide. They withdrew from Kurakhove because the Russians were outflanking them in the south. You know that they from Konstantinopolsk, they are going to the to the west. And also in the north, you could see that they took Sonsivka. They moved a little bit west, even to, I think, Shevchenko is the name of the little village. So Kurachovo was in an extreme danger of being encircled by Russian forces. And this is the reason why the Ukrainian army left this relatively intact town. Yes, exactly. You can see this very good there, that Kurachovo is sort of in a semi-encircled environment, where in the north they already bypassed it, and in the south they already bypassed it. So from a military point of view, it makes absolutely sense to withdraw from the town, while of course the town is still intact. And we even know that there are some 100 people still in the town, which unfortunately are now under Russian control.
Julian, analysts from the Deep State project reported on the night of the 6th to 7th January that Russian forces had occupied the village of Lozova in the Izum district of Kharkiv region, as well as Ivanivka and Shevchenko settlements in Donetsk region, reported by Deep State. But what is the level of threat in Kharkiv region now?
Well, I think the Russians keep pushing from the east. First, the good news, they were stopped in the north, which is really good news. They were stopped south of Hlyboke. They were stopped in Vovchansk, so they are not moving forward there, which is very good news for the city of Kharkiv itself, because different from Pokrovsk, for example, the Russians are not coming in a situation where they can use these wire-guided or fiber wire-guided or FPV drones from a very close distance to terrorize the people in the town. So this is very good news. At the same time, unfortunately, we are seeing that they keep pushing on Kupiansk. I think the Kupiansk pocket on the eastern side of the Oskil, which is still Ukrainian held, it's quite well defended. Exactly, we see it here. But unfortunately, as you just mentioned, again, we have the Russian flanking movement in the north there, where they are moving over the Oskil, moving to the western river side, and also in the south and the Terny area, which you also mentioned. I think Ivanivka is the name of the little village there, which was captured by the Russians. Exactly, you see it there. And I think, of course, this is a very big problem. There's no breakthrough. There's no Ukrainian army running away. But again, unfortunately, meter by meter, village by village, the Russians are crawling forward. They're crawling westwards. And whoever hoped that they will stop at the Oskil, unfortunately now sees that they already crossed the Oskil and they are moving in the Izium area, which I think is very dangerous. I visited Izium myself also 3 months ago. And it was a relatively peaceful town where you could see a market, you could see people living there. So I really fear for the people to once again, not now, but maybe in the future, if the fighting doesn't stop, again come under Russian attack.
Julian, despite Russia's attempts to secure Dnipro Islands for assaults, now we're talking about Kherson region, experts highlight strong Ukrainian defenses to counter these plans effectively. What does Putin really want in Kherson region? Do you agree that Kherson faces risk as Russia aims for foothold on Dnipro's islands?
I think we have spoken about this a couple of weeks ago already, about the threat from the south. And right now, I do not think that Russia has the potential to wage another offensive from the south towards the Dnieper. I know it's mostly dried out. You can see this, unfortunately, even on these images. You can see that because of the Russians detonated the Kakhovka Dam, that there's not much water now between the front lines, between the Russian occupied territory and the free territory of Ukraine. But in Kherson as well as Zaporizhia region, I right now do not see the Russian potential of having a large-scale assault on this area. You could see that, I mean, in Kursk, and I think we will talk about this later, that the Russians need North Korean soldiers. They need, I would say cheap meat from the east, cheap meat from North Korea, which is like the worst circumstances on earth to live there. And that's why, well, of course, it makes sense for them, of course, to be sent to Russia to advance or to even defend areas. So I don't think that in the south there's an imminent threat of an offensive. Also in Zaporizhia, what we have seen over the past couple of months is that in Oriri, for example, there has not been a major Russian offensive. Yes, they are trying to go north from Robotyne, but mostly they are coming from Donetsk Oblast. So from Velika Novosilka, this is where you have a big problem. This is where another Ukrainian town, I know it's a small town, only 5,600 inhabitants, but you can see the same tactic as before. The Russians are attacking directly and outflanking from two different sides. And right now, I think there's only one supply road left for Ukrainian forces and also for Ukrainian civilians in Velika Novosilka. So this is a big problem. I think if the Russians are advancing in the south, they will advance from Donetsk Oblast because this is where they are strong. This is where they have massed their troops and where they are having at least more small steps towards occupying more territory.
Julian, on January 5th, Ukrainian military launched another attack in Russia's Kursk region, where they have been maintaining control of roughly 500 square kilometers foothold since August 6. A military facility important to Russian troops was attacked in Kursk. Before that, Russians complained about a massive drone attack, according to Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Counter and Disinformation. What do you know today? What is happening in the Kursk region?
Well, I think referring to the attack you just said, it was I think Ukrainian officials said a lucky punch because someone was having information about the 810th, I think, Naval Brigade of the Russian Federation having a meeting there, a high officer meeting, and it was attacked again. We are very happy that Ukraine is now finally allowed to use HIMARS and ATACMS ammunition. This is Kursk, but anyways, from the United States. Unfortunately, I think this is a big problem. There's no reports of more ATACMS ammunitions coming to Ukraine. So we have the permission now from the Americans, but you have probably also seen reports that there are only 50 ATACMS warheads left, according to some HIMARS ammunition. Good news, Ukraine is getting more HIMARS ammunition from America. We have seen this in the last weapons package, but you know the distance, the range is only 85 kilometers. So this is not much, so you cannot strike far inside Russia. I think it was Rylsk area in Kursk. I think it's possible to reach with HIMARS ammunition, but it's very dangerous because you have to drive very close to the border in Sumy Oblast to fire them. So anyways, I think it is very, very positive that Ukraine keeps pushing towards high value targets of the Russian Federation and especially, of course, of the units it is fighting. You were mentioning Kursk I think we have seen several reports over the past days that there are different offensives. There's a Russian offensive ongoing towards Malaya Loknia coming from the west, and there has been a Ukrainian offensive in the Pogrebki area, in Berdyn area, I think, so going to the north. So this is really interesting, I think, that Ukraine also, before the Trump inauguration on January 20, Ukraine is at least trying to improve its situation in Kursk and is not giving Russia the narrative and also the strategic advance of saying whenever Trump comes to office, there will nothing to be traded away from Russia. So we don't have to offer Ukraine anything in terms of, for example, Ukraine withdrawing from Kursk and we are withdrawing from Kharkiv or something like this. So I think it's an interesting move. It's also a very reasonable move by the Ukrainian army to not allow Russia to occupy everything or recapture everything of Kursk Oblast right now.
Julian, do you agree that Kursk region may signal beginning of Putin's end in 2025?
Sorry, you have to repeat that. Putin's end? Putin's end. You mean the end of Putin?
Yeah, may signal beginning of Putin's end in 2025.
Well, I'm working for a newspaper. I'm writing about Putin, Putin's health, Putin's successors, Putin's problems for 9 years now for Bild newspaper. And I think there has been a lot of hope, at least from our side, that this sickness or this Putin not showing up for a couple of days, or this Wagner mercenaries marching on Moscow, or this economic failures are a sign on the beginning of the end of Putin. But to be honest, I stopped hoping for this because all signs and all interpretations so far have been far too optimistic. We are seeing Putin still, steering the country, still, waging war not only against Ukraine but also hybrid warfare against the West, against the European Union. We have another data cable being cut between Finland and Germany, so we are also affected by this, of course, in a much less way and much smaller way than Ukraine. But right now, I'm not seeing any signs of Putin going down or Putin deteriorating in Russia. I think you may not forget that Russia is a dictatorship. So what the people are suffering is not important. If the people are hungry, or if the people are unemployed, or if there is inflation or something like this, and people cannot buy cheese, for example, anymore, this is terrible for the people, but this is not terrible for the leadership. Putin only gets a problem if his cronies, the people around him, the oligarchs, the rich people which are running the country, if they feel they are threatened. And I think so far they're not really feeling this. I know they cannot do vacations in Saint-Tropez anymore, but they can do vacations in Dubai, for example, or in Istanbul, or in the whole of Turkey or Egypt. So I think they are coping with the situation of the sanctions so far quite well. And the Russian leadership, the Russian regime has been able to, to mitigate the consequences of the sanctions quite well. And I think right now they are still quite stable, unfortunately.
Julian, you said you were talking about North Korean troops and soldiers from the 8th Separate Special Operations Regiment of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, SOF, have killed 13 North Korean servicemen in Russia's Kursk region, reported by press service for the Special Operations Forces. If we're talking about details, SOF soldiers killed 5 North Korean fighters in a gunfight and another 8 using drones during special operations. After the battle, the SOF personnel conducted an inspection of the North Korean soldiers' bodies and their personal documents. Why are North Korean troops taking heavy casualties, how do you think? And what's next?
Well, I think the Kremlin needs meat. It needs infantrymen. It needs people to push forward, to throw into the battle. And yes, these North Koreans are, as I said before, unfortunately for them, for their families, for their personal safety, they are cheap meat, which is just traded by the dictator Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang to the dictator Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And these persons have a very, very bad fate. I mean, they, I think, are even seen by the Russian army as the lowest personnel which is available, maybe comparable to Russian prisoners a year ago when Mr. Prigozhin was still running his mercenary army. So right now there are not many Russian prisoners anymore to sacrifice in Ukraine. So right now they're going after the North Koreans. And of course, you know that these people have nothing to say about their fate. They're coming from a hardcore dictatorship. So I think it's quite logical that Ukrainian special forces are encountering them. Also, from what we have seen from Ukrainian footage, it seems like these soldiers are still using the 1950 tactics. I mean, in the war against South Korea and the United States. So they're just amassing and running into the battlefield, running over open fields. Without any cover, and we have seen this in the past. This is a suicidal tactic. I don't know how many North Korean soldiers are deployed there. Once we heard about 8,000 or even 12,000, but at the other point, if you hear Ukrainian forces killing 13 on a day, it's not the big human waves we know from the Korean War in the 1950s, where 10,000 people or 5,000 people were running and trying to storm a position. It's more smaller warfare. It's the typical Russian strategy. We have seen this. So maybe a company or platoon is running, so 50 people, maybe 100 people. That's the maximum attack we have seen so far from the North Korean soldiers. But still, they are suffering heavy casualties. We have seen they're injured also in Moscow hospitals and in other regions. And interestingly, as you mentioned, that many of the documents are forged, which is really interesting. So they are not fighting there as North Korean soldiers, but as sort of Russian conscripted. I mean, not conscripts, not Russians, but maybe people with an agreement to fight for the Russian Federation without their official or without their original documents, which is quite telling that Russia is not willing to tell the world that North Korean soldiers are dying on its territory.
About Russian losses, UK intelligence has stated that in 2024, Russia suffered record losses in killed and wounded in infantry attacks on many fronts of Ukraine, with December being the month of the highest losses, reported by European Pravda with reference to a review by the UK Ministry of Defense on the 7th of January. What does this indicate?
Well, I have not seen tens of thousands of Russians killed in December, as the Ukrainian army is indicating. I have just seen that the Russian army is advancing faster than ever before in the second half of 2024. If this happens under massive casualties, as the Ukrainian army says, okay, then this is the case. But in this case, again, I have seen the recent numbers, I think from yesterday, that 1,900 Russian soldiers were killed and wounded on one day. The day before, or some days before, it was more than 2,000 soldiers on one day being killed and wounded, which is a brigade size. Again, unfortunately, I doubt these numbers. I'm not seeing visual evidence for them. Even a battalion number of 500 killed and wounded per day is not confirmed by Ukrainian footage, let's put it this way. What we are seeing in Ukrainian army's official videos, which are spread by the different brigades and different units hunting down Russian soldiers, is probably a company-size casualties per day. So maybe we have, in the videos, in the evidence we are seeing, maybe we have 100 or 200 casualties on the Russian side per day, which I think is still a lot. It still makes the Kremlin troubling. I have not seen any visual evidence for more casualties. If the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense says the Russian losses are 10 times higher than what is shown in the footage, I can only take it as this.
Also about fantastic news, Ukrainian F-16 fighter pilots had records for shooting down enemy missiles during one of Russia's massive attacks on Ukraine. He destroyed 6 Russian cruise missiles in one combat fight, says Colonel Yuri Ignat, head of the Public Relations Service of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Your first reaction on this amazing news from Ukraine?
Yes, as you know, the Ukrainian Air Force are operating F-16 for a couple of months now, and I think they're operating them better and better. We have not seen, not even Russian propaganda claims are saying that they destroyed all the F-16. As we heard in the past, they destroyed, I think, 200 HIMARS systems before there was visual evidence for the first one. So what I think is Ukraine is using these aircraft. They're using them with in a very special manner, not for attack operations, mainly not, but for defensive operations. You need live information, you need intelligence to hunt down these Russian cruise missiles. But again, it's possible, of course, because Russian cruise missiles are traveling with under 1,000 kilometers per hour, some only 700 kilometers per hour. So it's possible for one F-16 to go after them with the right coordinates, with the right information, and hunt them down. So I can only, of course, congratulate the Ukrainian pilot, because how many ever missiles he shot down, or cruise missiles, he saved probably a lot of Ukrainian lives.
Julian, you remembered about Trump, but now about Kit Kellogg. Yes, President-elect Donald Trump's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia has postponed his planned trip to Kyiv and other European capitals until after Trump's inauguration on the 20th of January, reported by Reuters with reference to its sources. What does this mean for Ukraine, and also what does this mean for the United States of America?
Well, I would not call it a negative sign so far. I think the special envoy has to visit Ukraine and Europe as soon as Trump is in office. I mean, it would have been a symbolic gesture now to be there and be there before Trump is inaugurated. But I think we can relax for now. Again, it's a big black box. What will happen if Trump comes to power? Well, there's still the official promise of ending the war within 24 hours. I doubt this will happen, but we will see. I mean, the special envoy has said many positive things, I think, about the situation, about how to continue with the war, how to help Ukraine. We have heard much more negative wording from the future vice president, from the family of Donald J. Trump, and also from Elon Musk and others who seem to be quite influential of him. So I think we have to see and wait what happens. I'm under the impression that the Trump administration, and I really hope so, will not throw Ukraine under the train. I think that they will send the envoys, and they will hopefully make an offer to President Putin, which he cannot reject, which means this offer has to be supported and backed by strength, by power, and by the clear message that if the Kremlin does not stop attacking Ukraine, then there will be severe consequences for Putin and his allies.
Julian, thank you for this interesting and very important conversation for Ukrainians, and not only Ukrainians. Thank you. I need to say that Julian Röpcke, senior political editor at Bild, was with us today. Wish you all the best and see you.
Great. Thank you. All the best to you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.